Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation podcast.
Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation, where our experts bring you fresh ideas and new perspectives on how consumers eat, drink, shop, groom and think. Each episode features a discussion of current topics, from the latest consumer trends and new products to shifts in markets and lifestyles. I'm Andrew McDougall, Associate Director of Beauty and Personal Care at Mintel, and today we're discussing diversity, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Roshida Khanom. Welcome, Rosh.
Hi, I'm Roshida Khanom. I am UK Associate Director for Beauty, and I'm based here in London.
We're also joined by Toya Mitchell, so welcome, Toya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Toya Mitchell. I'm a Senior Multicultural Analyst in Chicago, United States.
Welcome, Toya, and also welcome to Richard Cope as well. So welcome, Richard.
Hi, thank you. I'm Richard Cope, Mintel's Senior Trends Consultant working out of London with our European clients.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a big welcome to all of you. As I said at the start, we are looking to discuss diversity today, and we do have a good sort of diverse range of perspectives and views from different people in the room and on the phones to talk about this. So I guess the first question and the first topic I wanted to look into is just how important diversity is in consumer goods and in life in general, and also why this is important, particularly within different demographics.
Well, I can start talking about this from the statistical kind of point of view, if you like. I mean, obviously, it's morally essential that brands embrace diversity, but if you look at it with cold eyes, just in terms of the market, certainly for Europe, this is the way things are going. You know, Europe has an aging population like most parts of the developed world, so it's going to fix the dependency ratio by having more and more young workers coming in from different parts of the world, namely Africa, the Middle East, as far as Europe goes. So society is going to become more diverse. I think here in the European Union, we've already got way in excess of 22 million non-EU citizens living in the European Union, and that's going to continue to rise. So it's the way the market's going. So companies need to wake up to the reality of that, embrace it, and cater to diversity.
This is Toya. In the United States, the population is basically following the same trends. We will be a majority minority country by 2042, meaning that 50% or higher of the U.S. population will be a person of color. So multicultural marketing, diversity and inclusion, it's a business imperative, in addition to ensuring that companies really speak to their target.
And I just want to add that it's something that all consumers want as well. I think there's an assumption that actually it's only ethnic minority groups that want diversity, but when you look at the consumer statistics, it's consumers across all different groups that want to see more diversity and representation, both in product development but also in marketing. So it's not something that only the groups that are most affected want to see more of. It's something that everybody wants to see a bit more of, and actually everyone benefits from.
I think that's a good, interesting point to make as well, just in terms of, I think sometimes when we think of diversity, it's very easy to sort of think of one, when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about this or we're talking about that, but actually there is such a diverse range of things that we are looking to discuss. We are talking about race, gender, age, disability. In beauty, for example, body positivity is another big thing that we're seeing a lot coming through in different skincare and hair care campaigns. So I guess, how does targeting these different demographics actually differ when it comes to diversity? So, for example, when we're targeting men with diversity, when we're targeting women with diversity, again, we have to approach diversity in a very different way. There will be different cues depending on what we're discussing that we will have to touch upon. So how does it differ depending on who we are targeting and how we are targeting?
I would say that I think that it's about how you want to reach any target that you want to bring into the fold. So if you are, and I'm using a quote from a former boss, if you are looking for left-handed blonde people, then for whatever your product is, then you have to go out and find those people. You have to understand what is their motivation, why are they doing, what are their attitudes, what are their perceptions, what makes them unique. And I think that tapping into whatever makes a particular target unique, whether it's based on ethnicity or race or sexual orientation, whatever makes that particular target for a particular category unique, is to understand their attitudes or perceptions and speak to it in a very honest and authentic way to say that this is a product or a service that's going to be of value to you.
I just want to say as well, actually building on that it's a fundamental human need that we want to feel respected and we want to feel recognized. And I think it's definitely important that we understand about specific consumer groups, but we also should understand that there's a lot of commonalities across them as well. So we're talking about men versus women and targeting them differently. One of the things we see a lot in women's marketing campaigns is this whole notion of body positivity. Now, does that mean men don't want to see more, better representations of different body shapes? No, it doesn't. It's just that it's not being catered to them right now. So I think whilst it's important to understand the differences and sort of marketing towards those differences, we should also bear in mind there's a lot of similarities as well.
Yeah, I think we have to detect, and explore, are there differences or not? I mean, I remember, I've been at Mintel a long time now. I remember back early 2000s, the media was obsessed with this idea of the pink pound, and they were particularly looking at things like holidays, especially for gay men. And there was lots of excitement about how this was a big untapped commercial market. And I think people quickly found out that the kind of holidays gay men wanted to go on weren't much different from the kind of holidays heterosexual couples wanted to go on. So yeah, sometimes I think we're sort of going in the wrong places and there isn't necessarily a difference, and we have to explore whether there is or not.
I think that's a good point when we talk about sort of targeting men and targeting women in different ways, and making sure that we do that targeting in a genuine, authentic way also. I think men, in general, when it comes to beauty, and we look at men being targeted, you mentioned, Rosh, about the body positivity element of it, and I think men are almost desensitized when it comes to diversity in a different way to others, purely just because men have always held maybe historically power in society, so they've maybe been safeguarded to the types of images that are put upon them. But we are almost seeing now that the likelihood of men being engaged in beauty advertising, for example, are much more likely to be sort of young athletic types, which is the image that then's portrayed in the adverts, which again is then actually marginalizing a lot of other men, and sort of, so it's almost like chicken and egg that we have now. It's almost like we're sort of, where is this cycle going to stop? This idea that when we target men, we're targeting that young, sort of appealing demographic of men, but actually that's kind of part of the problem. So I think, it's interesting to see how we will target men differently to women. And speaking just of beauty advertising now, of course, but it is interesting to see how you do really have to, and again, to go on to Richard's point, you do really have to look at and listen to your target audience to know how we target them effectively without tokenism coming into play as well.
You know what I would add to that? I think that not only is it important to understand by category, but also by brand, especially within beauty. I think there are some brands that are very aspirational. And so because of that brand equity, regardless of who you are bringing into the brand, you're going to want to ensure that you're speaking to that aspirational aspect as well as whatever a particular target would be appealing, would be of appeal to a particular target within that aspirational brand. If you go on the other end of the spectrum, if a brand is more natural or more realistic, then you still want to speak to that brand equity as well as any specific target that where that brand is going to be appealing. So I think it's by category. I think it's by brand. At the end of the day, I think that a brand has to have clarity as to their equity, who they are, who is going to see them as being valuable, and ensure that they're speaking to that target in an authentic way across the board.
So who would you say then, from what we've discussed, and I'm very aware not to make this too beauty centric because that would be my thing, but who would you say then is getting it right then? Because I do think that sometimes, I mentioned tokenism earlier, but I do think that we do see a lot of consumers, particularly from the British data that we've seen in the UK, we have seen that consumers don't always feel that diversity shown in advertising is particularly sincere. There is this still skepticism or doubt around why certain adverts have been sort of portrayed or positioned in the way that they are. But who do we think then is getting it right? From a beauty aspect, I would call out brands like Fenty Beauty, for example, because they've done very well. But are there other examples? Richard, I'd be interested to know your views on this, just because you cover such a broad range of different companies, of who's getting it right, and also who could maybe do a little bit more.
Well, looking around at sort of beauty and personal care, I've been impressed by this campaign, Sally Hansen's Sheetopia campaign, if we look at it in terms of, gender equality, just because I think when you're looking at any kind of issue like this, if you can do it in a sophisticated way, and that campaign's got a lot of good humor around it, sort of subverts cliches, you're halfway there, I think. But the other thing you've obviously got to do is, as soon as you start going into this territory, you've got to be all in. You've got to be fully committed. If you're leaving anything to chance, if you're not crossing all your T's, you're in trouble here. So we know, for example, the Gillette campaign has had their campaign, is this the best a man can get? Well, I think you and I, Andrew, agree it's a laudable campaign with its intentions, but it's come under fire because if you look more closely at that brand, they're still employing a degree of pink pricing in terms of charging women more. So that's a sort of fatal error if you're going to try and follow that campaign. The other brand I'd like to talk about is Nike, because Nike's a brand we've been championing with their Dream Crazy campaigns. Obviously, back to what Toya was talking about, they understand where the market is going in America, with making Colin Kaepernick the key to their campaign. They realize the future of Nike is not angry middle-aged white men burning their trainers, sneakers. Sorry, Toya. Talking about. So they realize that's not the. They realize that's not the future. They realize the future of America is young multicultural America, and the future of Nike is beyond America, it's China as well. But let's call out Nike a bit as well, because they've done really well with their Dream Crazy campaign, fronted by Serena Williams, yet they themselves are embroiled in controversy at the moment because we're finding out that the female athletes who Nike sponsor, when they become pregnant, the checks stop coming through. So, they're not perfect either. So you need to look at every aspect of what you're doing. I mean, Nike's done a great job of championing Serena Williams as a sportswoman who's had a baby, come back, won more titles. But if they're going to do that, I think they need to carry it right through to the end if we're looking at gender equality, and they need to make sure they aren't sponsoring female athletes and then stopping those checks once they become pregnant. They need to offer the people they sponsor maternity leave as well. So I think the challenge, you've seen some laudable campaigns here, but the challenge is really carry out a thorough overview of your company. You look at every aspect of your company and make sure you're staying true to what you're saying at every level.
And I think it's important that they are lauded campaigns as well, as you said, that we are saying it's a very positive move they've made, because it is about taking steps. We're not saying overnight solutions are going to come straight away, but it is important to, as Richard was saying, I think, to look at your own practices and make sure that you're at least taking steps in the right direction. Let's be working towards things. Consumers want more transparency, so they want to see that we are making efforts. It's better to make those steps than to be not doing anything at all, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree on that, because, we spend a lot of time at Mintel talking about how, we have political fragmentation at the moment. People don't trust governments. It's hard to find a majority government anywhere in Europe at the moment. So brands are in a position to govern, and brands are they have a responsibility to change the agenda, raise the moral agenda. If you look at some of the people who are in power around the world at the moment, and brands have an opportunity to do something about this. So yeah, it's laudable that they are trying to do that, and we'll forgive them some mistakes along the way.
I was going to say, in the United States, I would say that CoverGirl is doing a really good job in having broad appeal, having a central and clear brand equity that has different applications across their target. They have my Musk, who is actually Elon Musk's mother. She is a cover girl. She is in her 70s. She's absolutely gorgeous, and the message is, just because I'm aging doesn't mean that I don't care about my looks. I think she is a perfect cover girl. They are also very inclusive in terms of gender, in terms of color, in terms of size. And actually, CoverGirl has been that way for a number of years, both now as a Coty advertiser and in the past when it was P&G owned. So they have really elevated their brand equity, and they've kept in step. And I wouldn't even say in step, but I think that they have been at the forefront of ensuring that they have always been an inclusive brand.
I think CoverGirl is a great example. I absolutely love their new tagline. So I think that's a brilliant example from beauty. I think for me, this is purely from a personal point of view. I think the UK fashion or UK high street fashion brands are doing really, really well. So 10 years ago, it was impossible to find modest clothing on the high street. Now it's so widely available. And one of the high street retailers that I think really kind of led the way was H&M. So back in 2015, they were one of the first brands that actually used a Muslim hijabi model in an advertising campaign. And now they've got a whole modest collection. And they're just one of a few. ASOS have a collection as well. And there's a few others that are online. So yes, Nike's done the hijab. So I think fashion's a really interesting one. I think they've really kind of taken strides ahead, particularly when it comes to offering modest options for Muslim women. That's a really personal.
No, but I love that though, because it's all about making things more visible, isn't it? And sort of, I hate that sort of term, normalizing, but it's sort of making it sort of like you just see it. Like I love the, Emoji have just launched 230 new emojis this year, and so you've got things like people with cochlear implants, or if you have walking aids, or like the period emojis, or just so many. There's all these things now that actually they should be part of our normal vernacular. They should be part of the normal conversations that we have. So we do need to have, I think, more visibility on things like that. I loved what Burberry did for the LGBTQ plus campaign they ran, the Rainbow Check campaign they ran a little while ago as well. Sort of, that was all about having sort of the rainbow pattern in the clothing to sort of highlight that, so incorporating it into designs, but they're also making donations to charity and highlighting or putting the spotlight on certain LGBTQ plus sort of situations or issues that they're having. So again, it's that sort of holistic approach of not just token thinking, right, let's go with this community, but actually investing time, money, and effort to go with that. So yeah, I love that kind of concept. I think we've picked some good companies there.
I would say it goes back to Roger's comment about being respected. I think everybody wants to be seen, and everybody wants to feel as if they are of value, and being seen, being represented means that this is a brand that gets me, this is a service that gets me, and I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it is of value and it is valuable to me. And I think at the end of the day, every brand wants to do that. And I think the way to get there is to really is to understand the consumer insights as to why this brand for me.
So going a step further with that then, not just from that sort of consumer campaign sort of result, and what you were sort of mentioning there, Toya, as well, is about sort of looking at sort of diversity and inclusivity, and how important is that then just within organizations, so just for companies in general, within their own organization, rather than just the marketing campaigns that they're putting out there publicly, but how important is it? And how difficult is it to get started with having diversity and inclusivity as a genuine behavior and an attitude throughout your brand or your company?
This is just me personally. I believe that, just kind of based on what I've experienced and what I've seen in the last couple of years, if a company is inclusive first, followed by diversity, meaning you can be your authentic self when you are at work. You can demonstrate what is different, what is the same, without feeling of retribution, and that the end goal is to move toward a company goal. I think if a company starts with inclusion at the beginning, then the diversity piece is a little easier to feel, rather than go ahead.
Just building on that, I just want to share a quote that I heard a few months ago at a diversity presentation. Diversity is being asked to the party, inclusivity is being asked to dance. And I think that's a really nice quote. Diversity has almost become a bit of a checkbox. We've got to have this many brown faces in our advertising campaign, or we have to hire this many people from this background. But actually, if you're going back to your point about inclusivity, if you're making people feel respected and welcome and comfortable to be their true selves, and that's where you're going to get, true, you're going to get people shine. Yep. Actually, you're going to get innovation. I want to share an example from my last company that I used to work for. So I used to work at P&G, which was absolutely brilliant when it came to inclusivity and diversity. And there was a lady I knew there called Sumaira Latif, who at the time she was a manager in IT. She won't know me because I was just a lowly researcher in R&D. But she went on to take on a number of different roles. And one of those was she was the Global People with Disabilities leader. And then she became the special consultant for inclusive design. Now, Sumaira Latif is blind herself, and you may or may not have heard, but last year, I think it was late last year, Herbal Essences talked about how they're launching these new bottles that are going to have sort of tactile functions on them that will help people who are visually impaired. And so she was part of that, kind of developing that product. And so that's a really nice example of where, somebody with very specific needs has been nurtured and encouraged and given a role with kind of creativity and innovation, a sort of a creative and innovative role. And so she's been able to help develop products that are, is better for the company overall.
I think that's important as well, because there's a genuine brand attitude at that point then, because by focusing on inclusivity within the organization, not thinking about campaigns, but as you say, it then leads to innovation in different areas. So I think that's important. I mean, I don't know if you've got anything more to add on that point, Rich.
I would just add that, the studies are out there proving that the more diverse your company is, the more financially successful it's going to be. And, in terms of companies starting off with this, I think it's like anything else where you're trying to change a company. People will forgive you if it takes a while. I mean, be honest about, what kind of diversity you have in your company. Publish the figures. Don't wait for the next government equivalent of the gender pay gap to be set by the government, because it will happen. There will be a diversity report forced on companies soon. So embrace the future and, self-report, be honest about that, set yourself targets, grow up in public if you like, I think is what brands have to do with this. But, again, putting my hard statistical hat on here, I mean, this is the future. This is the way it's going. The workforce is going to be diverse, because the old way of looking at things in Europe is going to be yesterday's papers. It's an aging white population. The workforce is going to be diverse. I don't care what people say in this country or what they voted for. That is the way it is going, and it is going to be. So embrace it now.
You know what I want to piggyback on that? You said to set targets. I think that is absolutely crucial. You have to have a target. You have to have definable goals. And it's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier this morning, and I think it's the difference. I think that companies have struggled with efficiency versus effectiveness. I think efficiency is about what you can see now, versus effectiveness is putting your faith in what you believe is going to happen in the future. And I think that whether you're speaking of diversity and inclusion from a talent resource perspective, or if you're thinking about it from a business perspective, I think that because there are a few companies who are really invested in doing it right, then that effectiveness is kind of future forward. But it's something that companies have to have an actual definitive goal to say this is what we're going to be, and ensure that that it is a part of a company goal, a company plan.
And I think also it has to be reflected all the way through the organization as well. You've got to have diversity reflected all the way through to senior levels. People have to feel as though they're seeing leaders that represent themselves. So I think it's important that it's across all levels and also all parts of a business.
And that's important, really, I guess, in terms of sorting your own house out before going public with all these campaigns and looking at how can we be more inclusive and diverse in the campaigns that we're sort of promoting to consumers. Ultimately, consumers are going to know if you're authentic or not in your messaging, and your house has to be in order first, basically. It has to be a case of you need to be listening to your own employees, you need to be listening to your own cultures that, in the environments that you work in. So it really is important, I think, to look at inclusivity and diversity within before sort of looking at promoting these messages going forward. Unfortunately, I think we've possibly come to the end of our time. I know we could probably speak on this for quite a while. But thank you so much, all three of you, actually, for your insights on what is clearly a very relevant subject. From Richard's strong words, quite clearly a subject that we will be talking about in the future, whether we like it or not. So, yeah, definitely a lot of developments in this one for the future. But thank you very much for your insights. Thank you very much to Rosh.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's been wonderful. And I think you've already given us the title to the podcast with your quote earlier as well. Thank you also to Toya as well, joining us from the States. So thank you, Toya.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much as well for your strong message as well, just at the end there, Richard. I really felt it, and I'm just sitting a few feet away from you. But, I'm sure it comes across the audio waves as well. So thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
And it's thank you from me. I'm Andrew McDougall. Thank you very much to everyone for tuning in and listening to today's episode. To learn more about Mintel or any of the topics that we have discussed today, then head over to mintel.com and you can find out more. And also be sure to subscribe to Little Conversation wherever you get your lovely podcasts in your ears. But all that's left for me to say again is thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day.